Hey there, welcome to Unwrapping Wine. I'm one of your hosts, Randall Voss.
And I'm Anne Swink.
In this episode, we're joined by Jessica Youngblood of Youngblood Vineyard near Ray, Michigan, which is just north of the Detroit area. The vineyard and winery are run by Jessica and her family. Jessica also serves on some industry boards, including the National Grape Research Alliance and the Michigan Craft Beverage Council. So most of the wine industry in Michigan is located on the western side of the state, generally in the southwest or northwest corners, and that's to take advantage of the lake effect. Youngblood Vineyard is an estate winery located on the eastern side of the state. So we're going to break this episode into two segments. In the first segment, we're going to talk to Jessica about the advantages and disadvantages of being an estate winery and the challenges of being in a new part of the state. In the second segment, we're going to focus on the red wine grape Marquette. In 2019, Youngblood Vineyard had the best dry red wine at the Michigan Wine Competition. This is notable because Michigan is a state that has a wide range of grape cultivars, including the traditional European ones. We hope you enjoy this episode.
I started with the NGRA about 6 years ago as the Midwest regional rep, and then moved on to the executive committee and then chair for another year now. And I also was appointed by Governor Whitmer 2 years ago to the Michigan Craft Beverage Council. And so I represent winemakers in the state of Michigan. It's very cool, the Craft Beverage Council. We represent all craft beverages in the state. And so wine is just one of the four craft beverages that we represent. And I'm one of, there are 9 seats and there are 2 winemaker seats. I'm one of them.
Cool.
And let me be clear, while I'm the winemaker, my husband and I are actually the team. We are both the winemakers. I'm much more the palate and sensory, and he is much more the chemist and the mathematician. So just keep that in mind. But it is the both of us, yeah.
Can you explain what's the NDRA?
National Grape Research Alliance. So it's an organization. Yeah, it was an organization started back in 2003 by Gallo, Jerry Lord, some really big names in the industry. Say Michelle. I'm trying to think of who else would have been part of that in the very beginning. Quite a few, and really to increase the sustainability of this industry, to focus on research, to focus on not just wine grapes, but to find the research that matters to all grape sectors. So wine grapes, juice grapes, raisins, and table grapes. So it's an awesome organization, and it stretches across the whole United States. So every region is covered and every grape sector is represented. As evidence of me being chair in the little Midwest in the tiny state of Michigan, when you think of the majority of grapes and the regions in California, they're very fair and very diverse in the efforts and the representation. So it's very cool to have not only a seat on that board, but also show that how inclusive we all are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it always impressed me with that group. It's a true nationwide group. It's not just a California. Obviously, California is represented, but and like I mentioned when we spoke on the phone, Danelle, she does a good job getting out everywhere. So yeah.
It's one of the cool things about that organization. It's really come full circle. And I think about when we first started thinking about planting a vineyard, we fell in love with wine country in Virginia. We lived there for about 3 years, just outside of Loudoun County, about an hour. And, I said to my husband, man, it'd be really cool if when we moved back to our family farm in Detroit, if we could ever plant wine grapes, that'd be amazing. I didn't even really know Michigan had a wine growing region. I had never been to the other side of the state. I'm not from the state, but we had the family farm here. And he said, I remember hearing about these crazy grapes at University of Minnesota, and they have this grape breeding program, and they're growing these crazy grapes that can sustain these unreal temperatures. And I think maybe they'd work for us. And so we started doing a lot of research, and the Northern Grapes Project was actually one of the tools that we used, which is really cool when you think about that is one of the projects that was supported by the NGRA long before I knew anything about the NGRA or its mission. So to see how that tool and that supported project helped me in my life's work is pretty neat.
Cool.
That's awesome.
One thing, Jessica, that I thought was kind of interesting about your situation is you're in a very diverse wine grape state in Michigan. And if you look at Michigan, it is pretty much dominated on the western side of the state, being the wine region. And you're on the eastern side. And if you want to maybe explain how that sets you apart, what you do differently a little bit, then we can kind of go from there.
Sure. would say probably 60 to 70% of the grapes grown in the state of Michigan are, of the wine grapes are vinifera. The other probably 30% are cold hardy or other types of hybrids. And then we have, so if you think about the total acreage in Michigan, we have about 10,000 acres of juice grapes. So Niagara, and Concord, those are all contracted with Welch's. So you don't see a lot of those vineyards necessarily out in the public, but they're there. And then there's about 3,400 acres of wine grapes. And the majority of those, I would say 90% are along Lake Michigan shore, but within 10 miles or so of Lake Michigan shore. It's a great growing region. They are able to, reap the benefits of lake effect. They get that blanket of snow. They have more mild winters. They can grow grapes that don't necessarily need to have the kind of varieties that I do. For example, we have I always say predictably unpredictable winters. We have extremely cold temperatures. We have ice. We don't always have snow. And so that means that I get to get creative and think about the kind of varieties that are going to grow really well in this area, not just survive, but really thrive. And one of the benefits of being where we are this far south in the state is that we're really warm. And so in the summertime, we can really ripen our fruit nicely, which I think is fantastic. It's done really wonders for our vineyard and our wines. One of the drawbacks is it is very cold. And so thankfully, due to all the research that University of Minnesota has done and others, we're able to grow grapes that can survive these temperatures and thrive in these climates and the heavy soils that we have. And exciting. It's exciting when you think about it. You think about the entire state, and the entire state could be doing what we're doing and growing what we're growing. And so we really have an awesome opportunity here to expand the grape growing region and to provide more fruit in the state for wineries.
Can you please explain a little bit about what it means to be an estate vineyard?
Okay, what it means to be an estate vineyard, and we do a lot of education in our tasting room, because people will say your wine says estate grown on the label. I see lots of wineries that say estate grown, or I see estate on labels in the grocery store. So aren't all wineries estate? And I say no, that's a very coveted word that you get to use on your label, and the government cares very much about what's in my wine and how I label my wines. And I have to have all of my labels approved by the federal government. And so because of that, a wine that is at least 75% one variety of grape can be considered a varietal, for example. So my wines, most of them are varietals, not all of them, but an estate wine must be grown on that property and processed on that property. And so all of our wines are estate grown, meaning that we don't purchase any grapes outside of our vineyard or any juice or any bulk wine. And so I have the right then to say estate on my label. So in the Midwest specifically, it's really expensive to grow grapes, and it would be much cheaper for me to just have a tanker of Chardonnay drive in from Washington State or Oregon or California and fill up some of my tanks with Chardonnay, and I would very easily, I would save a lot of money that way, and I'd be able to put Youngblood Vineyard Chardonnay right on my labels. Consumers would come to my property, they would see grapes, a lot of grapes, and they would just assume that Chardonnay was grown here on this property. I wouldn't be able to put estate grown on it. That would be the difference. But we are really transparent, brutally transparent about all the work that we do here. And we do like to teach people a little bit about labels. So when they go to the grocery store, when they go to other tasting rooms, that they know what they're getting and that they can understand what's in the bottle. So lots of wineries have estate grown wine, and lots of wineries are going to say estate on their label. And that means that wine was grown on that property. It doesn't mean that all their wine was grown on that property. And if you read the label, you can see that. So that's the difference between an estate wine versus a non-estate wine.
Talk a little bit about, maybe the challenges and advantages of being an estate-only winery, and how that maybe reflects in your wines if you're sourcing your fruit from your own vineyard.
Well, I think it comes down to the story. I think people that visit our vineyard, we are an agritourism business in a very metro area. When you think about the state of Michigan, 10 million people, I have about 7 million people that live within an hour of me. And so that's a huge advantage to not rely on tourism and to just, to be here. While we are the first commercial vineyard in this area, I doubt we'll be the last. And I hope that we're not the last. One of the disadvantages of where we're at is that there are no other vineyards for me to collaborate with. There's nobody, there's no buddies down in this area to, maybe taste wines through, do any bench trials with. We're all about 4 hours away from all of those other wineries and all the other people making wine from the same grapes we are and others. And so I miss that collaboration, that camaraderie. And also, what if one of my tractors breaks down or my press, so I need some glass? It's like, dang, it'd be really nice if I had some friends in the area that could, we could help each other out with stuff like that. We just bought a harvester, which is a really expensive piece of equipment. And if there were other vineyards in the area, think how we could share that piece of equipment. It'd be a huge, huge advantage to all of us. Back to kind of your question, and one of the disadvantages is when we have a really bad year of frost or with some catastrophic event, too much rain or too cold or too much heat. Not that we've ever experienced drought, but it could happen. And I lose a bunch of fruit, then I only have what I have in my inventory, and that's it. So in 2021, for example, after we had that frost in 2020, I basically stopped selling bottles of wine mid-year. And could only use my wine for tastings and by the glass because I physically didn't have it. The difference between a rough year and a good year, we have 4,000 vines of Marquette. In 2020, we harvested enough to make 40 cases of Marquette. That's how much we lost. This last year, we harvested enough for 500 cases. So that's a substantial, dramatic difference. And so, yeah, that makes it tough. So hopefully I don't have 2 really bad years back to back. So far I haven't. And so like every farmer, we're pretty optimistic about there's always next year. So things will be better next year. We'll do things better next year. And hopefully the weather's better next year. I'm thinking of the advantages. People come here because they know now where their wine comes from. There's a story behind it. A lot of people have been part of this process since day one. They've helped us plant grapes. They've helped us pick our fruit. Over the first 4 years that we harvested grapes, we had the community coming out and volunteering to help pick our fruit because it didn't have a harvester. And I would say in 2021 was our biggest harvest. Before we got our harvester, we had 500 people come out from the metro area over a course of 7 different harvest days. And it would just be 3 hours each of those 7 days, but we picked 46 tons of fruit with 500 people over 7 days. The next year, which thank goodness, because I don't know how else we would have done it. So these people were invested. They came out here with their families, their kids. They picked grapes. They ate grapes. Their kids ran around. They had a lunch afterwards, took a bottle of wine home, and then could not wait to come back the next year and try the wine that they helped pick. Whereas the next year in 2022, when we got the commercial harvester, when I had it serviced, we picked 62 tons of fruit that year. It took 2 people, one person to drive the harvester and one person to basically stand on top of it. And there were 10 hours of runtime on it. That was it. So it is mind-blowing, life-changing equipment. But from that, now I have people that are upset that I've taken away their experience and they've been replaced by a machine. So once we get our wine club rolling, I guess we'll have to save a couple fields for wine club members to come help be part of the process. But people do love the story and they do love coming here and being part of this process. So a huge advantage.
So given that you have the control over how you grow your grapes and you make wine from them, what do you think you do, or what is the most important for you to ensure you're going to get like the flavor, aromas that you really want in these wines, since you 100% know you are going to be making wine from the grapes that you're growing?
That is probably the absolute key point, and the best part about having an estate winery is that I, other than the weather, am in complete control of the chemistry of these grapes. But even when the weather plays a role, I still am in control. If, like I said, with the Marquette, when I knew we were not going to get the heat that we needed, that meant I could make that decision right then and there, what style of wine I'm going to make from that grape, versus forcing it to be something it shouldn't be. Like I said, growing grapes in the Midwest is really hard. We deal with a lot of things that you don't deal with in the desert, for example. We have an excess amount of precipitation, which means an excess growth of canopy. It means excess growth of weeds. It means excess bug pressure. All of those things mean that we do have to really spend a lot of time, a lot of money on labor for managing the vineyard, the canopy, the floor of the vineyard. And also, that also means putting down sprays. And I know nobody likes to talk about those words, but it is what it is. Whether you are an organic farmer, whether you're not an organic farmer, you are using some types of sprays to mitigate the disease pressure, the bugs, mildews, any of those pressures that you're going to be dealing with. You want clean fruit, healthy fruit. Nobody wants to be making wine from fruit that is rotten, or has had bug damage. It just doesn't make good wine. And so we do use sprays. These grapes, though, they don't require quite as many as some varieties of grapes. But you do really have to stay on top of that and make sure you're protecting your fruit from the rains and the precipitation that we have. But because I'm in control of the vineyard and can decide when I want to pick the fruit based on that chemistry, it means it might be a little more expensive some years because I want to let that fruit hang a little longer. I might need to get another spray on it. I might need to spend more time suckering. There's just a lot that goes into it. But I get to decide when to pick the fruit. And I think that that's the most important part.
Yeah, especially in Michigan, you got such a diverse set of cultivars, and maybe one of the underappreciated and maybe the consumer would appreciate knowing this too. If you compare the cultivars you're growing to, the Cabernets and Rieslings of the world, I mean, they're going to require much more pest management and pesticide use than the varieties you're growing, just because they're way more disease prone. I think that's a story that people growing these super cold hardy varieties could really tell is yeah, they're new, they're maybe a little bit different, but they also require a lot less disease management. And so, if we're trying to look at, going more green, if you will, that they're a tool to move in that direction. The other thing I think is kind of cool about your situation is you're bringing the wine to the people rather than asking the people to travel to the wine, and
Yeah.
there are people that want to go to, travel 2-3 hours or 4 hours, whatever it is, to like a wine region. There's also a lot of people that, like you mentioned, just want to go to their backyard. They want to support local. And I think, yeah, what's cool in your situation is we got great varieties to do that about anywhere now. And it speaks of that local and people want to stay home a little bit more.
Yeah, and we're not, I don't find us a threat to any tourism or any other wineries to the other side of the state. We're just in addition to. I still travel to the other side of the state. I love Michigan wine. I travel to Traverse City. I travel to the west side of the state. I love drinking local, and what's grown there is their local, and that's really fun for me. All we are is we offer families that live in the area. We're very family friendly. We have our own kids. We've got animals. We offer them an opportunity to just spend the afternoon here, come out for a couple of hours. It's not, I don't think people have stopped going to the other side of the state or taking trips to wine countries because Youngblood is here. That's not it at all. We're just an extra winery, just an extra resource, an extra fun thing for people to do in addition to going to the other side of the state.
So here's a heavy hitting question here. I saw on your, I don't know, it's one of your social medias that you got like 4 Great Pyrenees dogs. So I'm assuming you're a dog person, right?
Oh no.
We are, but
okay.
we are like a serious animal people and just in general, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Before Anne starts to, I have 2 Great Pyrenees. I live on a farm, and so I'm a dog person, and Anne's a crazy cat lady. So, let's call it what it is. So yeah, power to the Great Pyrenees dogs.
We do. They're working breed. We get them from the same breeder, so they're a couple years apart. But we have 2 sets of brother and sisters. One is 7, almost 7, and the other set is almost 3. That the second set is a little more naughty than the first set. They like to venture, and they're a little more agile. So while we have 40 acres fenced in, they still like to explore. So every now and then, one of them will jump the fence. So that gets to be a lot. But they always come right back, or they're just checking it out. They want to make sure the entire area is very safe, not just our farm, I suppose. But the dogs really do provide a really good working service for us here, because not only do they participate in our goat yoga with all the other animals, but they also, keep the whole vineyard, as safe as they can from raccoons and other predators that are trying to eat the grapes or eat our animals. So they're awesome and they're sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry for the side conversation there. I just had to get that dig in, and,
They are a
Yeah.
huge part of our vineyard, so it's not a side conversation at all.
So what are some of the varieties that you are growing?
We grow for reds, we grow Marquette, Petite Pearl, and Frontenac. And then our whites are Prairie Star, Itasca, and Frontenac Blanc.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite out of those? If you have to
Of
pick, I know
course.
it's like choosing your favorite child, right? But probably not
Yeah.
that bad. But yeah, what's your
Well,
favorite?
of course, they're all my favorites in the sense of just like my children, but some of them behave better than others. And some of them, I love growing certain varieties more than others. For example, Marquette is probably my least favorite to grow. It's got a lot of laterals. It is
True that.
quite the canopy. It's a beast. It's a Medusa. I'm pruning it right now, so I'm definitely feeling it. But it's my favorite wine that we make. There's nothing like it. And it's consistent. There's so many different things that we can do with that grape. So it's my favorite grape. I also love growing Itasca. I would say Prairie Star, though, is probably for white grapes, Prairie Star is my next favorite grape. So Marquette is my favorite red for making wine. Prairie Star and Petite Pearl would be my favorite grapes for growing, just because with Petite Pearl and with Prairie Star, they just behave so well on trellis. They're really disease resistant and they're just so easy to manage, and they just look gorgeous all the time. However, my wine favorites would be Itasca and Marquette. But both of those grapes bud out before everything else. So the fear of frost damage in the spring is always the biggest with those two. So
Okay, so you have late frosts coming. So you're concerned
yes.
that they're gonna bud out and then a frost is gonna come sometime in what, May?
Yeah, May
And
18th
then-
this last year. Yeah.
And then kill off all of the new buds.
Yep. So, and that happened
Okay.
on May 18th this year. So, of the 8 years I've been growing, we've experienced frost damage twice. Once in 2020, we had 4 days of consecutive frost. I believe it's kind of just a bruise in my memory at this point, but I believe it was like May 15th, 16th, 17th. I don't think it was the 18th, but it was 4 days around that time. And we lost 80%. But when I say 80% of the whole vineyard, I lost 90% of Marquette. I lost like all of Frontenac. I mean, there's certain varieties I lost all of Itasca. But the saving grace was Petite Pearl. So thank you, Tom Plocker, for breeding that grape, because I have never experienced frost damage on Petite Pearl, not once. Petite Pearl buds out 2 weeks, typically 2 weeks after everything else. And so it really is quite protected. So I really owe a lot to that workhorse.
So when you started with these super cold hardy varieties in Michigan, did you see any do you have any challenges in terms of consumers not being familiar with the cultivars, or other wineries maybe not taking them seriously? Were there any barriers or challenges when you started with these in terms of marketing or consumer industry perception?
I love your question and I love controversy. So
yes.
Yes. So I will flat out give you the answer that maybe some people don't want to talk about. But the answer is no. I did not have any trouble selling these wines. No, I did not have any trouble with any consumers. People were so excited to try something that was local. That's a real trend right now. It has been for quite some time. They want to support local businesses. They want to drink local, eat local, and this fits right into that. I have not had any trouble selling our wine because of the names of grapes or anything like that. Have I had trouble in the wine industry in general when you think about like other winemakers or grape growers? Yeah, I will say that the reason I don't use the word hybrid is not because of consumers. It's funny, when I moved back to Michigan and to the Motor City, I thought, wow, hybrids, this is so amazing. I'm going to grow hybrid grapes. Think of all the hybrid cars. The hybrid is such a cool thing. It is the best of two worlds. Oh my God, was I so naive? Not with consumers. But in the wine world, people thought, no, basically I was told this, that my wine would be bottom of the barrel, wouldn't sell. I would have to make it much cheaper because it was not going to stand up to the other wines. I think I
And
proved,
sweeter.
yes, and sweeter.
Hmm.
And all of these things, that it wouldn't basically be real wine. And um, I think we proved them wrong. I think Marquette really helped with that as well. But that's just on the industry side. The consumer side, if I called my wine, I mean, half the people that drink my Marquette think it's just named after the city,
Oh,
or that I just gave it that name. They don't realize that that's the name of the grape. Um,
Hmm.
all of our wines are the names of the grape, unless they're like a blend and not a varietal. Um, and and I do that on purpose. Like some people, I had a lot of advice from other winemakers that said, no, you got to give these fanciful names. And a fanciful name, for those that are not familiar with TTB rules and regulations, I can give my name. I could call it Jesse's Red, or Youngblood's Red, and it could be 100% Marquette, but people were giving me the advice that if I named it a fanciful name, that people would buy it, versus if I gave it the name of the grape, people wouldn't buy it. Um, and I don't think that's true. And when you work as hard as I do, growing these grapes year round and being estate grown like we are, I'm going to put the name of the grape on my bottle, and I'm going to put estate grown on it because I think it's earned that.
cool.
Absolutely.
No,
That's a great philosophy. Yeah.
It's interesting that, yeah, the biggest stigma for you was the maybe the preconceived notions of the industry, not so much the
Hmm.
people drinking the wine. That's interesting.
yeah.
Huh.
Hmm. So you mentioned that your favorite wine of yours that you produce is Marquette. Is that right? Of your
Yes.
reds. Okay.
Mhm.
What makes it so good?
There is just something special about that grape. It is the grandchild of Pinot Noir, for anybody who doesn't know. So that was, I want to say that was released in 2006, by University of Minnesota, so that it was commercialized so people could purchase that grape and plant it and make wine from it. So it's fairly new when you think about some of these other varieties, Chardonnays and some of these older world varieties, that people are really used to seeing in the grocery store. Marquette is really new. Um, it has just phenomenal chemistry. Aromatics are really amazing. It's very versatile. You can make it dry, you can make it sweet, you can make a bubbly, you can make a rosé. We just, for the first time this year, made a rosé out of it. And that was based on the kind of growing season that we had this last year. I talk a lot about the chemistry of the grapes and the styles of wine that we make. And Marquette, yes, since we won that award in 2019 for that best of class dry red in the state of Michigan, it was really put Marquette a little bit more on the map, and it helped us for sure too, and got people interested in that grape and looking for it at other wineries that they go to as well. And what's special about that grape, again, like I said, it is about the chemistry. So we do typically make a dry red out of that every single year. We've made a dry red. This last year we had very, very cool, wet summer, and the
Hmm.
growing conditions just basically were just begging us to not make a dry red out of that wine this year. And telling us, you can force any grape to do anything that you want it to do. But to me, it's just not going to come out like it should. And so we could have let that fruit hang a long time. I don't think it ever would have reached the right chemistry. I don't think that we had enough heat to make a really good dry red out of that this year. But the chemistry was absolutely perfect for making a rosé. And a rosé is just a style of wine that you make from a red grape, but you process it like you do a white grape. And so we picked the fruit a little early. So it had a little higher acid, a little lower sugar, which means it's going to be a little bit lower alcohol, like a traditional rosé would be. But the color of Marquette is just intense. It is so beautiful. The special thing about Marquette grape too is that it has a red flesh and a red skin. So it has an intense color. So the rosé might not look like a rosé that you think that it should. If you go to the rosé aisle in the grocery store, you see 35 different shades of color, anywhere from salmony to strawberry to a much darker color. Rosé of a Marquette is going to be a much darker rosé, but I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that is something that I hear a lot of too. Our rosés are also very dark, and
Mhm.
we have a lot of people ask, I had this red wine before. Oh, and then we determine that it's a rosé that they've asked about. Yeah, so I can understand that. That's definitely a unique piece of information, I think, to the Midwest grape varieties.
Yes, and specifically, you think about we make a rosé from Petite Pearl almost every year. It didn't last year, but that grape has so much more blue and violet tones to it versus Marquette, which is more reds. So it just makes a really cool color rosé, and I love
Hmm.
the colors of these grapes.
Yeah.
You mentioned Marquette, and you know, again, we mentioned Michigan being a super diverse grape industry, and 5 years ago, give or take, you guys won the best dry wine in the Michigan wine competition with Marquette.
Yeah, it was the first competition, and they called and they said you guys won best of class, and I was like, what does that mean? I didn't know. I just figured, there's a lot of medals. I was not a grower, was not a winemaker. I'm not classically trained, did not go to school for this. So really, I think that just points to one thing only, and that is really it's all about the grapes.
Okay.
And it's really really easy to make great wine from great grapes and great chemistry. You can obviously make drinkable okay wine from decent grapes, or you can fix problems in the cellar, but man, when you start with really good fruit, it's really tough to screw it up. So credit goes to the grapes. But yeah, it
Gotcha.
was really exciting, so that's been fantastic. And it really, I think it's helped put Marquette on the map.
Okay.
2 years before that, Marquette from the Petoskey region also won best of class in the Michigan wine competition for the dry red category. So that was 2 years, 2 years within 3 years that Marquette, that
Huh.
grape, won best of class. It was Walloon Lake. Matt Kilman was the winemaker. So really excited in a region that is predominantly vinifera to see Marquette do so well.
What aromas, flavors do you really pick up in your Marquette, and how does that maybe compare to other Marquettes you've had?
Our Marquette, I do think cherry with Marquette for sure. For me though, I get so much floral from Marquette from
Hmm.
the aroma, and like I said, it's very difficult to describe. It's just it's so fruit forward. No matter what I do to it, it's very fruit forward. So though it is dry, my residual sugar is typically like a 0.6, 0.7 on my Marquette. It seems to be sweet. It tastes almost sweeter than that just because it is so fruit forward.
Okay.
Our acids are fairly low. They're not, I would say our acids are usually about 8.5 or so on, or 0.85 on Marquette. So not the typical numbers that you see on Marquette, again, because I'm growing in a warmer region. And so I'm able to ripen that fruit differently than some areas. So my Marquette might taste different than, tip of the mitt, or, Wisconsin, or Washington. I mean, I haven't had any Marquette from some of those other states, or where they're warmer. So I'd be very curious to try it.
Hmm. Cool.
So I have a question for you, Anne. What is your
Hmm.
favorite wine that you
Marquette
make?
is way up there for me too.
It
Marquette is
is, right?
absolutely,
I
yeah,
know.
that's absolutely one. And I agree with you completely on the floral. That's my favorite part of it. I
Mhm.
think that it makes a great Cote Rôti style wine without needing any white grape because it does it all on its own.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Where can we find your wines and how do we visit you?
Oh, well, you can find my wines in the state of Michigan at my vineyard. So we are, for the most part, direct to consumer. There are a lot of rules and regulations with the TTB because I do not have an ABA. We have five in the state of Michigan, and because of that, I cannot sell my wine outside of the state of Michigan, because I insist on putting estate grown and the name of the grape on it.
Hmm.
So because of that, that's kind of a bummer. However, we do seem to sell most of our wine, no problem, out of our tasting room. I do have one grocery store that I sell it through, but not a lot because we're estate grown. So to me, it's liquid gold. So to try to put that into distribution is kind of tough. So it's tough to sell, when you're selling. I can self-distribute with my winemaker's license, If I were to do that, then I cut out that distribution and I can sell straight to any grocery store anywhere that I want to. But there's always a price cut when you do that. And it, like I said, it's expensive growing these grapes in the state, in the Midwest. And I like to make sure I have a good inventory. We did just finish building a commercial facility. So I have a brand new 16,000 square foot production facility and tasting room, which means now I'm open year round. So because of that, I got really nervous about my wine inventory, and I was all set to sell to Meijer grocery stores. I'm contracted, I could do it anytime. But I wanted 3 really good growing years with no frost. And I got 2 because this year we got frost. And so I decided not to sell to Meijer this year. Next year, possibly. But again, it's really important for me to be able to keep up my own inventory so that I can get through my own season, my weddings, my events, and my winter time. This is our first winter ever being open to the public. Typically, we were seasonal. We were out of a pavilion at the end of our driveway, which turned into 3 pavilions. So we've really grown. Thanks to this awesome community and all the interest and the support that we get. But yeah, we used to only be open Memorial Day weekend through end of October when it was too cold to stand outside and serve wine. Apparently, it's never too cold to stand outside and drink wine. But for me and the servers, it was too cold to pour it. So yeah, so
I could see that. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, it's very exciting to have this new facility because, like I said, it's we've grown a lot, and having a harvester and some, a different press and doing things differently and more efficiently has been a real gift. But yeah, so I can't ship you any wine. I'm sorry. But if you come and visit in the metro area, we're about an hour from the Detroit Metro Airport, and we're about 20 miles north of the Motor City.
Yeah.
So we're not far.
Okay, open how many days a week?
We are open 4 days a week, so Thursday through Sunday.
Perfect. We'll
And that might
make
increase. Yeah, and that might increase in the summer. We'll see. This is kind of our new off season. But we'll see how it goes. We have a commercial kitchen as well, so we're just getting ready to roll out a menu. The kitchen was just completed, so we're really excited to have that piece on the property now, so we can actually have more of like a restaurant as well.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
So exciting. Congratulations.
Thanks for listening. Check out Unwrapping Wine Podcast on Facebook and Instagram for information about the show, upcoming episodes, and to provide feedback. Episodes will be coming out every other week.
Marquette is probably my least favorite to grow, but it's my favorite wine that we make. There's nothing like it. And it's consistent. There's so many different things that we can do with that grape. So it's my favorite grape.